Today we're going to talk about my tube and how I like to use it. Talk about this. Jeez, you guys are dirty. NZXT's build is a quick and easy way to get a new gaming computer. Build a gaming PC on your budget using the built-in configurator and see exactly how your favorite games will perform. Want to build your own PC but still have the NZXT Peace of Mind warranty? Then the new BLD Build It Yourself kit has what you want. Buy it and build it yourself, and NZXT has you covered. To get started configuring or building your next gaming PC, visit the build link in the description below. So in my latest video, I talked about the fact that I used PMMA in my build, and I've been using PMMA a lot. And a lot of you guys were like, PMMA is just acrylic. Well, that's true. But as with most chemicals and chemistry, there are lots of different variations of that particular chemical makeup. So today I was gonna talk to you guys about PETG, regular acrylic, and PMMA, what some of the differences are, and which one you might want to use in your particular build, as I show you some of the nuances of working with each of them. So yeah, I mean, it should be interesting and hopefully educational. Okay, so one of the first things you have to realize when it comes to PETG is PETG is not acrylic at all. It is a completely different makeup. When it comes to PETG, it is the most sensitive when it comes to what type of fluid that you're using. So if you're using a glycol? Better go, glycol! But PETG is very sensitive to the fluids. Now, if you have a glycol-based fluid, you've probably seen some of the drawbacks depending on how long it's been in the system and how hot it's gotten. Because the other side of the equation here is what is the temperature resistance of the tubing itself. So PETG has one of the lowest temperature resistance of all the tubes that we've tried so far here for building PCs. Side note, yes, you chemists out there are very well aware that acrylic can also be formulated to have different chemical and, well, not chemical, but different temperature resistances ranging from something like 80 C up to like 160 C. So we'll talk about that in a second. Anyway, have you ever seen any of these photos of people saying, why did my tube like bulge up at the fitting? Why is it all bulgy and look like it has a very phallic now? I actually had that happen in one of my builds and I didn't notice it until I took the fitting off. And that's just realistically has to do with pressure in the system, temperature of the fluid, as well as the type of fluid that you're using. Did that fluid start to break down the chemical compound of the PETG? Now, PETG though is one of the easiest to work with because of the fact that it has a lower melting point than the acrylic tubes that we're finding that are being sourced by these manufacturers or the computer brands. PrimoChill, Corsair, AlphaCool, Bits Power, none of them are making the tubes. They're just sourcing them from industrial suppliers. And then the industrial supplier is packaging them, you know, nice and neat or whatever, or they're doing it in their own facility, but whatever, I digress. It's easiest to work with in that it's got a lower melting point, it's easier to bend, it's more forgiving, it doesn't bubble up as quickly and easily as acrylic. But the downside is the fact that it scratches and scuffs very easily because it's very soft. In fact, it's very bendy, as you can see. If I were to do this with acrylic, this would snap in half in no time. By acrylic, I mean non-PMMA. This stuff actually just designated as acrylic. It gets a little confusing, especially for people that work in chemistry, to have me say PMMA and acrylic as two separate things. But in terms of the way that they're utilized, marketed, packaged, and advertised in the PC world, they are two different types of tube. But there's things you can do with PETG that you can't with acrylic. And let me go ahead and demonstrate that first. So these are the RFB tool, or the finishing bit from PrimoChill. I don't know if PrimoChill makes these. I think they just source them. But anyway, the one's a 14 mil, this one's a 13 mil. Because the PETG is so soft, you can actually do this. You can put a lot of pressure on it and make ramen noodles out of it. But do you see how I was able to shorten it? It's super smooth now. Now you can do the same thing with acrylic. The problem with acrylic is it's much harder. This is both PMMA and regular acrylic, but it's also much more brittle. It's like that brittle hardness scale. So the problem is, if you go pushing on it, and I'm not gonna do it because I healed. I did this with my build where I was like, oh, I'll just shorten it with the bit. And it was making noodles and then it just shattered and I went into my hand with that bit as it was turning, gave myself a nice little gash right there. Fortunately, it's healed up by now. So you can use this tube, or this tube finishing bit, to clean up the edges, you know, from when you cut it. That way you can get it nice and smooth so that you're not It's very round right there now, both inside and outside. So what you're not gonna do is cut your O-rings as you put these in your fittings. You just need to keep in mind, PETG, you can actually use it to make big length differences. Acrylic, you can do the same thing, it just takes a little bit longer. In fact, I'll go ahead and demonstrate that now real quick. So this is the frosted PMMA from Corsair. Again, Corsair did not design this tube, they just sourced this tube. And this is one of the cool things about acrylic is you can get it in different colors. There's a black one right here. This is a solid black tube. This is a frosted clear, you can get clear. And a lot of, if you just go to a plastic supplier and you find one that's a 10 mil by 14 mil or 10 mil by 13 mil, which is pretty standard for fitting sizes, you can get blue, green, red, yellow, transparent, highlighter, all kinds of neat colors. And to cut this, you have to use a saw of some sort. You can't use the cutter, this kind of cutter, which you can on PETG. So this is just like a PVC pipe cutter right here. So PETG, it's a pretty solid, smooth cut. The worst thing you might experience is if you do it towards the end of the tube, it'll squish and oval it a little bit. But you can actually squish it back, put a little bit of heat, squish it back, and then use the finishing bit. It's perfectly round again, I've done that a lot. So clean cut, no cracks or anything. It's a little bit rough on the edge. I would just use the finishing bit then to clean that up. That's the only difference. And if you want to know what this like clamp is I'm using, I don't remember where I got it. Why is it cutting so sideways? So here's the problem too, right? Because the blade flexed, it like turned. So this is one of the reasons why I always leave some relief. I cut it longer than what I need and then I go down to the length that I need. Finishing it should normally be done with a finishing bit like this. So these are just triangle blades that go in the inside. And then here, inversely, whatever, it's the outside. So you can clean up the edges. You can do the same thing with this. But do you see how it's like nice and straight now? A lot better anyway. Let me fix that real quick. So it's still not perfectly square. I could still make it square if I took a little more time with it, but the edges are very smooth and round. But some of that like debris gets stuck inside the tube. So always flush your tube out with water or air or something so you don't get that in your loop. But do you want to see what happens? Phil has glasses on, I have glasses on. What? Well, I'll be dipped. So here's another piece of acrylic tubing. You see this? Now, one of the other things that PMMA is tougher than just the regular quote unquote acrylic. This one's already broken because we did a brake test on it. So it's not impact resistant. So this is pretty resistant. It's actually not that bad, but you can see it cracks and stuff. That's gonna happen. Here's another piece of acrylic. So pieces are just busting off, right? As expected. PETG. It's much more impact resistant. You can also see you can bend, you can bend it pretty far. So we'll leave this one in the bag. I'm gonna sacrifice this one. PMMA. What is with this? The video was why I like PMMA, so maybe we're just proving it. PMMA, the reason why I use it is it's kind of like the best of both worlds. It has the chemical resistance to like using PET or glycol-based coolants and stuff, which just about every premix on the market these days is a glycol-based coolant. Let's talk about bending now, as this one's all shattered and stuff. I wanna show you guys the point at which we start to see bubbles and stuff before we bend it. Gotta use some sort of a cord insert, otherwise it will just crush. So you have to mandrel bend it. The most frustrating part is gonna be, even though they're all labeled 10 millimeter internal diameter, cords are not created equal and neither are the tubes. So sometimes they don't fit. So what do we do when that happens? You get your tube lube. I don't recommend using this on the body. So anyway, I'm pretty sure this is honestly just hand soap, if you want to know the truth. So I would just use like hand soap gel and just a little bit, rub it on there. So anyway, this, it says put a couple drops. There we go. It's blue, it's soap, guys. It's just soap, okay? Pretty much gel, this is Brian, what are you doing, man? Anyway, it should Yeah, see? It's even bubbling up. It's just hand soap. It's literally hand soap. So as you can see, you got a little bit of lubrication in there now. So let's go and talk about bending temperatures now. This acrylic tube should bend really quickly because it's a 12 mil outer diameter. It's the only one I have at the moment. So it should bend fairly quickly, but what'll happen is once it gets to the temperature where it wants to bend, it'll bubble right after it very quickly if you're not careful, or blister. This is a cold tube right now. It's been sitting here in the warehouse, right? So I'm heating it up right now with this heat gun, heating it up quickly. Then as it starts to reach temperature, start pulling it away from the heat, but you can see we're starting to get some flex now. A lot of people tend to just be like, oh, and stay too close to the heat, and then they're like, why did it bend? Okay, so now we're bending. When you start to bend it on the inside, I have my arms over the heat. You can see how it's kind of like, it has a ridge forming right there. You don't want that. But one of the best things about acrylic and acrylic base tubing like this, soften that up a little bit more. See, if you bend it too tight, you get that, see that it looks like a penis vein? I don't know how else to call it. That's just ugly, right? So you can't bend it as tight as you would like, and once that forms, there's no getting it out. It's stretched, okay? You can really see it now with the tube out of there. But what'll happen with this tubing too is if you get it too hot, you'll get blisters in the plastic. Or excuse me, acrylic. Acrylic's really more of a, oh yeah, see, it's crushing now without a mandrel in there, but I wanna show you guys the blistering. There's the blisters right there. Now, it takes longer for the blisters to form. It's so fun to play with it when it's, hey, I made a pigtail. Literally a pigtail. PETG, on the other hand, cut off a piece of this. And I bet you this will just slide in without any problems. And not because of the lubes on it. Yeah, it's actually somewhat loose in there. PETG takes longer to blister than the acrylic. That's because the acrylic is a bit more sensitive to the heat. Now this will bend sooner, but it takes more to blister, and I think that just has a lot to do with the chemical makeup. But you want to heat a range of the pipe, not just where the bend is. You have to heat on either side of it, that way it can stretch the radius, otherwise you get, see how it's already bending? So it bends a lot. See, I know there was no timer, but if you were timing that, you would notice this tube bend started happening a lot sooner than the acrylic. You can see, working with PETG, it's a little more forgiving, but you can't get as tight of a radius. See how it's starting to create that little vein right there again, as I call it? But now, if we look at how long it's gonna take it to blister, still not blistering. Still hasn't blistered. I'm holding it really close to the heat. Look at that. Still no blister. Now we got our first blister. There's like 3 little bubbles there. So do you see how long I had to hold it on there before it would blister? PMMA takes a long time to heat. I was gonna make a sex joke with marriage, but I'm not gonna do that. So now we'll show you just how long it takes for PMMA. It's creating its own radius. It's really tight. You'll see we're not getting that crimp crease or whatever in the middle right there. Look how tight of a 90 that is. No wrinkle in there. Super tight. I didn't even use a bending tool. Usually what I do now is I just use the end of my table right here to make sure it's a 90 and cool it off like that. But now, the blister test. It's already spent more than a minute on the heat, right? And look how close to the gun I am with it. We got 2 tiny little blisters. 2 tiny little bubbles right there. Yeah, they're very tiny. There we go. I made that one bubble a little bigger now. Can you see it now on camera? Now look, acrylic and PMMA are the same thing. However, the PMMA has a lot of different chemical makeups, or chemistry makeup. So there's a range of like 80C to like 160C. There's different things they can do to add rigidity to it. Typically you cannot bend acrylic like this, okay? So They're clearly taking the acrylic, I'm bending it back the other way because it actually will hold that shape a little bit. So they're doing something to the tubing that is creating more impact resistant, because as you saw, I hit the table pretty hard with that and only get the tip to break off, where if I do that with the 12 mil, yes, I hit it harder. See, I mean, it's still like a glass, okay? But the entire thing didn't shatter out of my hand, which has happened before. So you have to just be careful with the way you work with it. But you can get tighter bends. It is more blister resistant. It is just, you can get it in black and frosted and clear. This is just what Corsair and their Hydro-X team has sourced. I'm sure they took a lot of different tubing from different manufacturers in the industry. Maybe even made some requests. I don't know. That's the thing, is you can customize this in the manufacturing process for so many different properties, and that's why I love PMMA. I kind of wish it came in 13 mil. Corsair only sells it in 10 by 14. I wish it came in 13. However, the extra 1 millimeter thickness in the wall is probably where they're getting a lot of the impact resistance and just the heat resistance as well. So PMMA, very friendly with different coolants, especially glycol-based coolants. Very impact resistant. That shouldn't be a thing in your computer, but it's a property to talk about. The frosted tubes look freaking amazing. When you put coolant in there that has color, it looks so good. Remember you guys remember the one I did where I did the tutorial on how to build a water cooling system, where I used this tube and I put light blue in there so it looked like ice? It was so cool. I used black in my previous black ice build, and it's perfect. You don't have to worry about painting it or anything because the texture on it is absolutely perfect. However, with this texture, if you wanted to paint your tubing, I'd go with the frosted and paint this. You don't even have to sand it. Just clean it with alcohol, make sure it's nice and clean, and then this will give the paint something to bite to and you'll get a nice, even finish. I know this sounds like one big Corsair ad. It's not. A lot of people just were like, what's the deal with PMMA? It's just acrylic. But I wanted to show you that when it comes to acrylic tubing as advertised for the PC use for water cooling and PMMA, they're not the same, and there is a legitimate reason as to why I use it. However, there are still, obviously, a lot of options on the market. PETG is still very friendly to use, but I personally find PMMA to be a tubing that I will be using for quite a while, and probably the frosted tubes, not even the clear, because just like anything else, the super clear, which by the way, acrylic, this is PETG, acrylic, yes, is amongst the clearest of the tube, like the clear tubes. But when it's frosted, that doesn't matter. So anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I know this video was probably not that interesting to people that aren't interested in water cooling, but there were a lot of questions on my personal build comments about PMMA, and it's just acrylic, and I wanted to address the difference between the two. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully this video has helped you in some way. Share it if you know someone that's looking to do a water-cooled build and they're like, I don't know what tubing to use. Maybe it'll help them decide. We'll see you guys in the next one.